All right, we're still missing a couple people, but I'm going to start up anyway. And I'll tell you what, I'll give you all the code I'm going to do, right? Okay, I'll give you all the HTML, I'll give you all the CSS, so I'd rather have you watch. I don't think what I'm about to do is very difficult. Okay, so I'm going to just come in here, I'm going to right mouse click, choose new folder. I'm going to just call this form example, okay, and open that up. And for right now, at least, all I'm going to put inside of it is just a new text document. I'm going to put in an index.html. That's it. All right, and then I'm going to say that I want to open this up with code. Nothing new there. You can all do that. I understand. So, as we start here, I'm going to open up this file and there we go. Do my exclamation point tab. You know what all that stuff is. So I'm not going to go over any of that. So form example. And this is exactly what this is going to be. I will put a CSS file in there. So link CSS, just call it styles.css. We'll create that later. It won't be very big either. So I'm in my body right here. I'll put in a main section. There's not going to be, like I said, a whole heck of a lot in here, but I'm going to put in form. Now, a couple things when you do a form, just so you're aware of this. Normally, you'd put action in here. If it's a form like this, you would put the word post in. That means that you're trying to post data or send data out to a server. Hopefully that makes sense to all of you, okay? The other one that you normally see in there if it's not a post is a get. And that's when you're getting information. So if I'm requesting information, it would be a get. If I'm sending information out, it would be a post. There's a real big difference other than that though. If I do a get, and you've all seen this before, if you've ever looked, for instance, I'm not going to do this, but if I'd go out to Amazon and stick a book, in my cart, for example, you'd see a whole bunch of stuff up there. You'd see the URL, then a question mark, and a whole bunch of junk. That's called a query string. That's where all the get information goes. And that's basically non-secure information. I don't think that if somebody knew I was ordering a book on CSS positioning, that wouldn't be a real big thing. On the other hand, if I go over to my cart and I'm going to pay for it, now it's going to change to HTTPS, and it's going to be a post, and it's going to take that information and it's going to hide it, for lack of better words, in the header, because it'll have things in it like possibly a MasterCard number or a Visa card number, American, you get the idea, PayPal information, etc. So in here, for right now, I am going to put in, it doesn't really matter, to be honest with you, with what we're doing, okay? And that's the method. I don't know why I said that. The action, you typically have two things in here, an action and a method, all right? And unfortunately, I was explaining the method to you. The action is where you want it to go. So in other words, if this was going to be sent out, let's just assume for a second here that I created a file in a language like PHP or Node.js or something where I could handle it. So I have my own server. Then I might put in something like process.php. And when I hit the submit button, if everything is working, that's where it'll go. All right, it'll go out to a file called process.php. Well, I don't want it to go anyplace because everything we're doing is right on the client side, so I'm doing it like that. This is what I mentioned before, post or get. Typically, when you're putting information in, you'll put post in there. When you're getting information back out, you'll put get in there. All right, it's not going to hurt. Technically, for what we're doing, you could leave them both blank. All right, and it wouldn't hurt one way or the other, just so you know that. All right, just in case I want to do any formatting here, I'm going to take my main here and I'm going to give it a class of contact, because why? This is a contact form. Okay, all right. So, not too much in here so far. Now, I want to be able to create something that when it gets done is going to look let's just say decent. I'm not going to say it's going to look good. Before we put any CSS in it, it's going to look bad. I'm just telling you that right now. But what I want is I'm going to put in a few fields like social security number, name and address, etc. We're going to put that kind of stuff in there. All right? So I'm just going to start filling it in. And I'm going to put in a little bit, then I'm going to show you what I did, then I'm going to fill in a little bit more, and I'm going to show you what I did, etc. All right? So I'm going to just come in here, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a label. And I'm going to say here, label 4 equals SSN. Hope you know that's the social security number. All right, and let's see, what else do I want in there? That should probably be enough. And I'll put in social security number. All right, so that's going to be a label. Hopefully, at least it makes sense. Now I'm going to put in an input. And what is that? That's going to say input type equal text. It's going to be much easier to show you this and explain it then. I'm going to say name equals SSN. ID equals SSN. All right, and we'll leave it like that. Now, I'll come back to this, but let me open this up in Live Server. And that's what you have so far. Now, that's not a whole heck of a lot. I understand that. And there's nothing that we've done with it. So the next field, if I put in there, for example, first name, it's, you know, this first name is going to be smaller than this, so it's going to be, this is going to be pushed over. Does that make sense to everybody? All right, but this is the label, okay, and this is the text box. The text box is where you enter information. You often say something like input type equal text, which means it's a regular text box, okay? And there are other things you can put in there, type equal email. So it'll check to make sure that the email is formatted correctly. It's got an @ sign in it. At the end, it's got a dot followed by an extension. It doesn't verify that it's a valid email. It would verify that the email is in a valid format. Now, I'm not going to do hardly any validation on here at all, just so you know, hardly anything. So, I mean, if I put hello in there for the social security number, it's going to take it. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. So that's the first one. So again, the label, by putting this 4 equals statement in there that you see, 4 equals SSN, what that means is when we actually come through here, if I click on the label, see how it puts, you know, it puts my cursor right back in there. That's just considered a good practice type of thing. If I didn't put the 4 equal SSN in there, it wouldn't do it. But what we're doing here is we're letting the system know, for lack of better words, that... Pardon? Yeah, it's, yes, that they are. You're right, that they're linked to one another. So in other words, that the label goes with that text area, or text box, I should say. Okay? Again, not like that's a real big thing, but just so you saw that. All right. Next, what we're going to do, and you know, I could have done it at the beginning, but I just decided to break it up a little bit, is sometimes, maybe you've seen this, that when you look at a form, sometimes it's got like little boxes around certain fields. And those boxes on form fields are called a field set. So I'm going to put a field set in here. Again, I'm not doing a whole heck of a lot in here, but I'm just going to throw in, just so I've got it, I'm putting in a couple line breaks. All right, now I'm going to come in and I'm going to say field set. Okay, so I'm going to set up a field set. Whoops, field set. All right, when you set up a field set, one thing that you can do is you can put in what's called a legend. The field set's going to draw a box around all these fields that I'm about to put in. The legend will, right in the middle, will put a little bit of a heading in there as far as what I want it to say. All right, so let's just put in here legend equal name, add, city, state, zip, that kind of thing. Okay? All right, so what am I going to put in there? The same kind of information. So in other words, I'm going to cheat here, and when I say cheat, I mean I'm just going to grab this stuff, and I'm going to go start pasting it in. So the next thing I'm going to put in here is right there, first name. And as you can probably guess, I'm going to change this to first name. And I'm going to change this. So since I called it right here, first name, I want to call it the same thing in here. Now you'll notice, I don't know what I did there. You'll notice if you take a look that as we start looking at these, every single one of these is going to have a name attribute and an ID attribute. Technically, for what we're doing in here, you don't ever need the name attribute. The name attribute goes with the server-side code. I'm putting in there for completeness. In a couple chapters or so, and probably more in the JavaScript part of the class, we're going to be talking about what's called the document object model, or the DOM. All right? And when you work with the DOM, one of the things that you use quite often is you use a DOM method that's called get element singular by ID. That's the ID. So if I wanted to be able to manipulate this programmatically, I could do that. All right? And like I said, hopefully when I'm going through this, it just it'll start making sense if it doesn't right now. And I'll put a line break tag here. And then right after that, I'm going to grab everything that I just did, all this first name stuff that I just did. I'm going to grab every bit of it. I'm going to copy it to the clipboard. And I'm going to paste it right below. Why? Because this will say last name. Now, I'm not done yet, but let's take a look at what we've got. All right, does that make sense? Taking a look at it, and I don't know why my legend isn't working, but it's not. I'm not going to worry about it because we'll get it to work. But do you understand? I now have 3 fields in here. All right, probably should have had at least, it looks like I forgot to put a line break, or if I did, I should have had 2 line breaks there. But you get the idea. All right. So let's pretty this up just a little bit. So after the first name, I'll make that 2 line breaks. Okay. Now I'm going to grab in here, and again, there's a lot of ways we could format this stuff, but I'm just trying to keep it in what I consider to be as simple a way as possible. So what I'm going to do here is right underneath where I am, right here, now I'm going to put in address. So label, address, and underneath the address, let me hit enter a couple times here. All right, so underneath that, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to put in city. All right, and underneath that, I want to put in the state, but I'm going to do that one a little bit differently. All right, so first I'll just copy this in so I have something here. So this will say state. Whoops. That will say state. All right, and let's see. This input type, for now at least, I'm just going to get rid of this. All right, what I want is I don't want the user to have to type in diddly. What I want is I want a listing of all 50 states, and I want that to come in there. Does that make sense to everybody? It's much easier. It's much less problematic, okay, etc. So, and I have it bookmarked someplace, but I don't remember where I've got it bookmarked. So I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to say drop down list of 50 states. And USA State, select snippet, free formatter. That might be the one I've used. I don't remember. But this is what I want right here. Now it might have Puerto Rico, the District of Columbia. I don't really care right now, all right, for what I'm doing here. All right, so I'm going to do a Control-C to copy. I'm going to come back into my code and let's put those line breaks on a new line and just put that right in there. Now that is going to make that a lot longer than it was. All right, but let's save this and let's go take a look at what we've got so far in Live Server. And again, remember, when you look at this, we have not applied a lick of formatting to it yet, right? So we got our first name, address, city, state, zip, and if you look here, so again, if I want to put in Missouri, there you go. All right. So I've got first name, last name, city, state. We don't have the zip. I'll copy that in just a second. But hopefully with what we're doing, it's making at least a little bit of sense to you. Like I said, I'll give you all this code. It's nothing big that we're doing here. All right. Okay, so let's see. We'll come back in here, and underneath, I'm just going to jump back down here to Social Security number. That one will work just fine. Why? Because I want to put in zip code in here. So I'm going to go arrow down. There we go. Underneath that, I'm going to put in this. Zip code. Zip and zip. Let's take a second here and take a look at, we'll just grab the zip code because it's the one we've got up here. All right. Again, this is a label tag. The label is for the zip code. We could have called it Z code. We could have called it zip code. I just am making it simple. That's all. So I called it zip. This is just the heading for the label. So labels have a start tag. It's considered good practice to use the for attribute, and they have an end tag. All right. Then we've got an input tag. The input tag, you specify the type. Common types that you use are text, like we used right here. TEL for a telephone. So you've all done this already where you've gone out to a forum or someplace else, and they've got like a phone number, and you click on it, and it brings it up in your phone already. All right. That still isn't 100% supported by every browser, just so you know that. All right. Other types that you can put in, like I said, are email. Now, there's nothing wrong with what we've got in here. Not a thing. Nothing wrong with it. After my field set, I'm going to come in here. I'm going to put in two buttons. So I'm going to say input type equals submit. Value equals submit. And I'm just going to leave it like that. And I'm going to put in another one right after it that says input type equals reset. We're going to go over what both these mean in just a second. Value equals reset. I'm going to save. I'm going to put in a couple more line breaks here. I know I'm going a little line break crazy here, but all right. So now when I go in here and I open it in Live Server, you'll notice I've now got submit and reset buttons. Now, had I actually had a server under that action attribute, so had I actually said action equal process.php or whatever, when I click that button, that's where it would try to go. All right. Now, as far as the reset, it sets everything back to its default values. So I'm going to just come in here and put in junk. Just going to keep doing this, and I'm going to change it to Hawaii. Fine. Boom, boom, boom. And notice when I click reset, well, make me a liar. All right, but it's supposed to reset. I don't know why it's not, but again, we're going to get this. I know that it works. All right, so that's what we've got in here so far. Now, the first thing looking at this, one of the things I'm going to want to do is by default, when you look at this field set takes up 100% of my width. So one of the things I'm going to want to change when I actually start putting some CSS in here is I'm going to maybe cut it down to like 50%. All right. All right. So like I said, we're building this. It's getting there. It's not great. I didn't do this, but typically up at the top, so right when we start this, we've got this form, etc., the form tag, but probably even above my form tag, I probably would have come in here and put an H1 tag in here and said something like contact form. Again, not that you have to do that, it just looks a little bit more realistic when you do something like that. All right. Now, a couple of other things. We're going to go on in just a second, but before we do, all right, I'm going to go back to each one of these fields. All right, so each one of these, and I'm going to add the word required. Okay, so required, first name is going to be, first name is going to be required. Last name is going to be, you get the idea. I'll just leave it right there. All right. So now when I come in here and I go to run this and I don't put anything in there, you get that automatically. Now there's other things that you can do here because this is a generic message. You see that. All right. But there's other things that we can put in there. So if I put anything, it's not validating it as far as what's in there. But notice now, all right, it says the page isn't working. Oh, that's interesting. But the point is, what it should have done here is if I had required in there, it should have done the same thing. Also, what you'll notice if you take a look in here is they've got an autofill thing that you can set to true or false. All right, so if I come in here and click that, notice what it's already done. Looks like I got kind of screwed up there. I've got address in twice. I'm not sure why, but again, we'll fix it. All right, that should have said city, and I probably just didn't change the heading. All right. But you can see that it's autofill that stuff for me. That's literally an autofill setting that you can turn to true or you can turn to false. Now, the good news is if you do that, fields that are of type password that we'll look at in just a minute, or of type credit cards, etc., that you set up, you can set those up so they don't autofill. All right. And why would that be important? Well, let's say you step away from your desk for a minute and somebody sees that. You don't want them to necessarily be able to see your credit card information. All right. So first, let's go back and change that from address to city. So we got address, there's city, there's the problem right there. That should have said city. Save it. Go back to here. You can already see that it's been saved, been changed. All right. So let's put one more thing in here under our zip code that's still inside of this field set. All right. So I'm going to grab everything here that you see. Yeah, that's fine. Right before we end our field set, I'm going to come in and I'm pasting it in again, but this time I'm going to put in email. Now I'm going to put for the type email. And it looks a little weird because the type is email, the name is email, the ID is email. And when I go back in here, you're just going to, you've already figured this out. All right. But if I put something in each one of these fields, and I get down to here and I leave it blank, all right, again, I don't know why that's not working. But what's supposed to happen in here, if I put in, for example, hello, all right, is I should be getting back a message. Like I said, I'm not sure why that's doing this, but it is. There you go. Please include an @ sign in there. It's giving me some information. All right? And that's all I'm trying to do here is to go over some of the generalities of what you'd put in here. All right? So let's see. Did all that. So let's talk about a couple of other things that you might want to put in here. All right, so outside of our field set. Okay, so this is going to be under our field set. So again, I'll hit enter a couple times and also put in a couple of line breaks right there, okay? All right, So what else do we might maybe put in here? How about this? Label 4 equals gender. All right. And, you know, a lot of people don't like this. And I know there's all sorts of things that, you know, if you go to certain places for the gender, they'll put in male, female, other, or male, female, prefer not to answer, etc. And I get all that stuff. I'm just trying to show you a radio button that's got male and female. In fact, we'll put male, female, and other. Okay, so we'll put 3 of them in there just so you can see these. So we've got this label now for the gender. So in here we're putting input type equal radio. Okay, that's the type that we're using. And again, we can put in the same stuff that we looked at before. So we can put in here name equals gender. All right. And we can put in here as an example, I don't know, we should put a value in there, I guess. So value equal female. Oops, usually you have a capital F. Female, okay, female. All right, am I missing anything? What if we think that most of the people who fill this out will be female? Okay, for whatever reason. So I'm going to put in here checked, which means that that one will automatically be checked by default. Now, if I've got 3 radio buttons, if you've never heard the story, they're named after when I was your age, and you had cars with radio buttons literally in them, you know, where you had AM radio and you pressed a button to go to a station. And you could only have 1 station at a time. That was the idea behind this. All right. So I'm going to grab this and I'm going to copy it twice, but I'm going to get rid of the checked for the other 2. So this one we're going to put in male. And again, I'm going to get rid of the word checked here. And we'll copy it down one more time. And we'll put in here other. And hopefully I set this up okay. If I didn't, you're going to know right away. So it's kind of hard to see from down there. And I'm not sure why I'm not getting my things. But you get the idea. All right. So the one I'm going to give you, it all works. So the point is, there it is. Notice if I click, see how it changes? Only 1 radio button can be selected at a time, period. All right. Oh, and the reason that didn't work is, yeah, I've got value. Technically, that should be a lowercase. That should be a lowercase. And that should be a lowercase. Because what you want to do is you want to put that here. So female, because that's the outside text that you're going to see. Male and other. Now, when we do this, they might almost run together into one another. See them now? So what we can do if we want to is you could add a couple non-breaking spaces, ampersand, NBSP, if you wanted to do that. All right. So again, you've seen that now. All right. Let's keep going here. What else do I have in here? Okay. So let's put another thing in here, and we're going to put in a label here. And we're going to say 4 equals, we're going to call it contact via. And if you say, I don't understand what that means, you will in a minute. Best way to contact you, type of an idea. All right. So I'm going to put in here input type equal checkbox. Now this is a little bit confusing, but I will explain it. Okay, so type equal checkbox rather. And we're just going to put in here name equals via, bracket, bracket. ID equals via. In fact, I'm going to leave the ID off because it's going to just be too confusing probably otherwise. So we'll just leave that like this. And I'm going to put in here email. That's fine. We won't even put in a line break. And I'm going to put in 3 of these. All right, so the first one will say email. The second one here will say phone. I don't know. Phone call. And the last one will say text. I don't know, not that great, but you get the idea. And I'm going to go back to my live server here. And now I lost my line breaks, but those are checkboxes. The difference between radio buttons and checkboxes, in a radio button group, only one can be selected. With checkboxes, you can select as many as you want. So in this case, I could choose 0, 1, 2, or 3. All right. So I should go and go back and re-add these, the line breaks that are in there, because somehow I removed them, or I'm using them for something else. So let me just go back down where that is and put in those 2 line breaks again. All right. So again, did that quickly, like in about a half an hour, and this is not a beautiful form. All right, but it's functional, and I think it shows you the things that need to be shown before we go into the chapter. All right, and again, just so you see this, first of all, there's way too much junk open here, so let me close a few of these things. All right, and let me just jump in, and I'll go back into here. I'll go into here. Here's my form example. Okay, I'm going to add a new, I don't want a new file there. I want a new folder, and we'll call it CSS. We'll go to our CSS folder. We'll add a new file. That'll be styles.css. Okay, and in here, I don't know how this is going to work just because of the fact that I totally redid the form right in front of you for what I did in here. So it'll either look good or it'll look crummy, but it's fine. You'll get the idea. So for the body, okay, let's just, again, we're keeping it simple. So the font family, I'm just going to use that Arial, Helvetica, Sans Serif. All right. The font size, I'm just going to have it default to 1 rem. That's enough. All right. For my labels, and you're all smart enough to realize this, if I wanted to, let's just suppose for a second, I wanted each label to look different than the other ones. I could give each label its own ID, for example. Or I could give all labels a class. I'm just grabbing label, period, which is almost like saying I could put in here class equal label if I wanted to do that. So I'm going to tell it to float to the left. You'll see why in a second. I'm going to say that the width should be 15 rem. Might be too big, but that's fine. Text align right. And I'm going to put a little margin right of 0.5 rem. Okay, so I've saved that. Let's go back and take a look at the form. And already, hopefully you can see it's looking at least a little bit nicer inside of here. Again, I'm not going to lie to you and tell you this looks good. And I didn't do anything with this, so I'd have to go back and fix that. But you'll see how these are at least lining up. Now, depending on how anal you want to be about this, you can go in and you can literally play with this, and you can change the width so that it lines up with the other ones. I will tell you, if you try to change the height, it's going to do weird things, just so you know. But you can do that if you want to. So we can, there's all sorts of things that we can set up in here. One thing I wouldn't mind setting up is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say with my field set, all right, that, and I already showed you this, I want the width to change so that it's only 50%. All right. That's pretty obvious. That was a pretty dramatic change when you look at it. All right. Now, when you look at this, I think the reason that this right here, these are pushed over, and this isn't pushed over as much is I probably didn't make it big enough with the way that I did this. So I could push this over a little more if I wanted to be real anal about it and line that up, etc. Just a couple more things, again, so you see them. So I've got here input focus. What does that do? I'm about to show you. So we're going to say border 2 pixel solid. You would pick the color here, navy. All right, what is that doing? First of all, you don't want a space there. Okay, so the easiest way is always to just show you. Notice when I click in here, it's now got a navy border around it. Sometimes what people do when they're doing these things, and we're going to get into validation. We're eventually going to take a form like this and we're going to validate it. Right now, there's not a lot of validation that's in here, just so you know. All right. We've got that required attribute, which is a little bit of validation if we put it on everything. But we will eventually go in and we will write a form like this and we will validate it 2 ways. We'll validate it first using JavaScript, and then we will validate it again using jQuery. Now, this may not sound like a big thing, but yet it is really important. And what I just want to mention to you is when you validate a form, you want to validate it. It should always be validated on your machine, on the client side. You should never not validate a form and boom, just send it out to a server. The server will validate it also. But if you already know it's bad, let's say that it asked for your social security number and that was a required field and you left it off. And you didn't put required there, although it's supposed to be a required field. Then it would get shot back to you by the server saying, hey, this is invalid. So you always want to validate it on the client first before you send it out to the server. All right, couple more things. Let's see. I didn't put any of that stuff in there. That's all I need to show you. All right. But I've got another one that I created that's a lot better than this one, and I will send that one to you. All right. And I'll do that probably during the break, which will take not that long from now. But let's just go into and talk about this because we've hit on a lot of this stuff. I showed you form, I showed you the buttons, I showed you text fields, I showed you radio buttons, I showed you checkboxes rather. I showed you drop-down lists. I didn't show you a text area. Let's just jump back in here and look at a text area. All right. So if I come back in here and go back into this one, and we'll say here, we'll just call this comments. Not a great name, but it'll work. So I'm going to say text area. In fact, we'll put a label in there first. Label 4 equal, we'll call it comments. And we'll say here, comments. All right, we'll have a text area here, and we'll say rows equal, I don't know, 15. Cols equal 15. And let's make it 25 so you see the difference. And text area. Okay? What did that do? It put in that. All right? Now, I probably should have made it a lot wider, but again, hopefully you're at least getting the idea of the way that this is set up. All right? And again, I lost my 2 line breaks there. But I figured this would be one time, especially when it would make a lot more sense to show you this graphically first. All right. Field set and legend, I'll fix that during the break. The file upload control, maybe you've had that already. So if you go out to a website and it asks for, let's say, a picture of you, and there'll be a button there and you click on it, it'll allow you to go and search through your system for a picture of you. That kind of an idea. All right. Then aligning, I've shown you a little of that. Formatting. Setting the tab order, we'll get into all that stuff. Let's do this, see how much of this we can get done, and we'll take a break right at 9 o'clock. All right, so as it says, a form contains 1 or more controls. All right, to create a form, They have a very simple one that they use in here that looks like this. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that form. All right. The main attributes, as it says, we could have given the form an ID. Okay. The action I already mentioned to you, again, as it says, you put a URL in there, so when you press the submit button, that's where you want it to go. All right. The method, again, as it says, it's typically get or post. It defaults to get. So if you don't put in a method, it's like you put in method equal get. I put it in an uppercase. It's case insensitive. The target, again, we could put in an underscore blank, etc. We've looked at all that stuff before. Common input elements, the type. You may have noticed I said for most of them, input type equal text. For a couple, I said input type equal button. All right. In fact, that may be where I screwed up. So let me just go back and quick look. Oops. Wrong editor. All right. So, no, that actually is right. Okay. Get rid of that. All right. You can disable things, which grays them out, if that's indeed what you want to have happen. You can make something read-only. So in other words, if I was spitting back something to you, all right, and I had you'd signed up for my newsletter, and I gave you some kind of a membership number. I don't want you to be able to change that, because that's how you're in my database. So that I probably make read-only. But if you look in here, there's very similar to the stuff I've already shown you. All right. So for buttons, as it says right there, there's actually at least 3 types of buttons, and I've shown you 2 of them. Not well, but I've shown you 2 of them. The reset button is designed to automatically reset the stuff that's on the form back to its default values. The submit is designed to submit something to a server. There's also a type you can put in there that is just a type button. Why would you want that? Because you can put your own JavaScript code in there, so if you click that type of button, it does what you want it to do. All right. So here they give you examples of 4 different buttons. So there's submit, there's reset. Okay. So the alert me, that's just a button. The checkout, that's a submit. The reset form, that's a reset. And you don't need to call it this stuff. Reset's a common name because people can kind of figure out what it's going to do. All right. Notice too that you can also take a button and make it an image button. Totally legitimate. So what you see a lot of times today in shopping carts is instead of saying cart, it's got a little picture of a shopping cart. All right, as an example. So here's one that's got both text and an image. So it's up to you as far as how you want to set that stuff up. As it says, when you click on a submit button for a form, type is submit. The form is sent to the server as part of the HTTP request. When you click on the reset, all the fields are reset to their default values, meaning their original values. All right. Using text fields, I've already mentioned some of this to you. I didn't put really any of this in here. Notice that we can put in here, if we want to fill the text box up with something, we can say value equal. All right. There's also a thing there as far as you can see with placeholder. That one might be worth jumping back in here just to show you this. I'm going to go back to the top and go back to the social security number. All right. And I'm going to put in here placeholder equals number dash number dash number. And again, you can immediately see what that did. Why isn't it showing? Well, oh, because I put it in the form. That was nice. So able equals, try that again. All right, so here we got, where is that thing? Label equal, input equal, type equals SSN, required, there we go. So in there, we'll put in placeholder equal. All right. Is that pretty obvious looking at that? Now, one thing, what you see in a lot of sites today, they don't have labels anymore. They've replaced labels with just placeholders in every single thing that's in there. And in case you didn't notice this, as soon as I click in here and I start to type something, What is in there goes away. Okay? If I remove it so it's empty, it comes back again. That's what placeholder text is designed to do. All right? And it should be simple, direct, and to the point. It's easy enough, as you probably all know, to screw somebody up who's doing something anyway. All right? You don't believe that? No joke. Just imagine this. You know, when I go to Milwaukee, where I'm from, and I work with my 90-year-old mother with her iPad, I can tell her something, and 5 minutes later she asks me, how do you do this? And it's what I've just shown her. Right? And she's not at all senile. It just doesn't resonate with her as far as doing it. So you should always make something as simple for people to understand as possible. And the only reason I put it in like that was to let the user know it should be in that format. 3 numbers a dash, 2 numbers a dash, and 4 numbers. All right? All right. You can set autofocus, which means, boom, as soon as the page is loaded, that form field, only set it to one field, but I could go back to the same field now and set that. Max length. I might set it for my social security number to 11. Number, 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 dash, dash, number. That's 11 characters. Max is how many things you can put in it. Size is how big the box is. All right? Okay. So again, they've got some examples there. As it says, there's several types. I didn't even show you password. By default, it used to be with password, it would put in the asterisks. Now it puts in the black dots for your password field. Okay? You can have a hidden field. What's a hidden field? It's one that you don't need to show somebody. All right? Maybe, you know, for example, maybe you work at Pizza Hut, and when somebody does something, you want to give them a final total. You don't want to show them their subtotal, their tax, and their final total. You only want to show them their final total. So you could take the subtotal and the tax total, and you could hide them if you wanted to do that. All right? Fields that are hidden are never technically hidden. And what I mean is, if you do the right mouse click and you choose View Page Source, you can still see them. But they're hidden on the form. They don't show on the form. All right, radio buttons I already showed you, and checkboxes. Again, you can set either one to checked. So they have much better examples than I do. In fact, a lot of times what you see is they'll have you build a form for a pizza company. And they'll put in something like this. You can only have one crust, but you can have, you know, there's only 3 right there, but technically you could probably have 50 different toppings. All right? So only one radio button, but checkboxes, since they're technically unrelated, 0 or more. Drop-down list, I already showed you. It's a little different because notice it starts with a select, and this is a little different. They got them in groups, but typically under the select are options. So the thing I showed you with those states, there was a select that made the drop-down list, and the options, those were the 50 states. All right? And if you're ever asked to do that, by all means, do what I did as far as don't key those things in. What I used to do just to see if people were actually going to go and look online for stuff or not was I didn't tell them that. And I walked over to a guy one day, and it was like, hold on just a second, I'm up to the D's. No, don't do that. Don't type in Arizona, Alaska, Alabama, Arkansas. Don't do that. Hell, just about anything you ever want's out there anyway. You can Google it. All right. List boxes. We didn't go over those, but there's another way that you can do this. You can set in these list boxes up so that you can only select one. You can select several. You can select several, but they must be connected to one another. Or you can select several, and they don't have to be connected to one another. Text area, I showed you. All right, and again, you typically set up the rows and the columns. Notice with the wrap specifies how text should wrap. Soft and hard, with soft being the default. So there is an example. If you make it too small, you'll automatically get scroll bars. All right. And again, as it says, it's designed for multi-line entries. Labels we've already talked about. I told you what the for attribute was, so they explain that in here. You don't have to use the for attribute, but notice it says, almost all of these have accessibility guidelines. You should read this stuff. All right. if you're ever asked to make a form, and a lot of companies today, when they bring you in, I had this happen, and this was many years ago. I went into a company and they said, okay, I did interviews with an HR person, I did interviews with IT people, and they said, okay, and I thought I was done. They said, oh, no, now it's time for your test. And they had me write a program. You could be asked as a web developer to go in and write a form. I'm not saying you will, but it's one thing you could technically be asked. They might say you got a half an hour, make this simple form and use some CSS and pretty it up, just to see what you're able to do, like, in a crunch time, so to speak, with just a few minutes, in just a few minutes. All right, the field set, like I said, I'll look at that. I don't know. I think I put the legend inside of the field set instead of putting it outside. I think that's what I did, so I screwed up. All right, we'll look at it in just a minute. All right. The file upload, again, if you want to use that, it's like this. So that as it says, if you want, maybe on yours, it would be, want to see a picture of me type of thing, and then you could bring it, whatever. Or, put in a picture you'd like to use as a background or whatever. Aligning controls, I showed you a little of that already. That looks a lot nicer in my opinion. All right, most people like it when every box, we live in a world where people are used to symmetry. They're used to things lining up. All right, well, I'm not. Okay, then don't do it. And they give you the CSS to do that. Formatting, I already showed you that. All right, in fact, I might have even used their example. I don't remember. Tab order, well, again, some people are used to tabbing their way through a form. Just so you know, if I go and run this again, so if I bring this up and I reset, and I go here, and let's just say I put in one, whatever, and I hit tab. Notice where I'm going. The reason I'm going that way, like that, that's the order in which I put them in. But if I didn't put them in that order, the tab index would be set to the order in which I put them on the screen. Does that make sense to all of you? But you can go back and manually set the tab index. All right? And that'll make more sense. I know, like, Angie knows how to do that from last semester because we set tab index when we were working with C#. All right, some of the validation, I've shown you very little. Autocomplete I showed you, but by accident. All right, the required we've already talked about. No validate. It tells the browser that it shouldn't validate the form or control that it's used for. What would you want it to validate? Well, maybe, I don't know. Maybe for some reason they can put in anything they want for a password. I don't know. I don't know why you do that, but you could. And again, they show you a form. I think that's kind of ugly, but you may or may not agree with that. Now, regular expressions, we could spend a whole class period on this. Did you hear me? We could spend a whole class period on this. I'm going to show you something that'll make your life a little bit easier. And that is, for a simple form like the one we did, if you go out to a site like html5patterns.com, you're going to see this. Not a very pretty site, but for example, if I say, oh, what do I want? Phones. And I want every phone number that goes in, I want it to go in the United States format. So it's going to be 3 digits, a dash, 3 digits, a dash, and 4 digits. So notice if I come in here and I type it in like this, and I check it, it's going to say it passed. But if I come in here and I don't do it like this, let's say I take the dashes out, and I try to submit it, it says, please match the requested format. There are hundreds, if not thousands, or more sites like this out there. But I like the HTML5 patterns because it's simple and typically it gives me what I want. All right. There's a whole thing. If you type in regular expressions, I mean, you're going to get hits in the millions. 192 million. All right. One that I use quite a bit is regular, I think it's regular expression .info. I could be wrong. Yeah. One of the ugliest sites I've ever seen, but it's nice. One of the things that I like about it is tools and languages. It says, okay, what language are you going to use? Well, there's JavaScript. All right. So they've got a lot of stuff that's, again, built in there that you're able to use. All right. I'm going to finish this up. We're just about through with the chapter, and then we're taking a break. All right. Data list is fairly new. You probably have seen this already, even if you think you haven't. So for instance, if I come in here, and let's say all I type in this box is an O, just the letter O, it's going to find this, because there's O's in Google, there's O's in Yahoo. It won't find that because there's no O in there, and it won't find that. So a data list is kind of a crude, rudimentary type of search feature that you can use. It might be nice if you've got a list of names, first names, last names, whatever, for common names, and you don't know how somebody spells something, you know, a last name. Smith can be spelled in a lot of different ways, for example. All right. All right, some of the new HTML5 controls. Email I showed you. URL says it literally has to start with an http://www something or an https://www something. All right, it wants it in that format. Telephone I already mentioned to you. All right. Number and range controls. These will become more important when we get into JavaScript. All right. And why is that? Look at this. So if you want somebody to be able to put in numbers, you can say that something is of type number. And you can put a range in, a minimum and a maximum. So I could put like grade. And I could put 0 for a minimum, and I could put 100 in for a maximum. That's all fine. Problem is I can still manually override that and put 1,000 in there. All right. You can use basically sliders like this, okay? But usually, again, that involves some use of JavaScript. The date and time, notice the maximum and the minimum. So as it says, the maximum date that can be allowed, the minimum date that can be allowed. All right? So for instance, if I was going to ask you to put in a birth date, I might check that it's somewhere between not today and maybe 130 years ago. Okay? And if I ask for a birth date, the minimum would be today. Now, you couldn't put in, I was born tomorrow, because that doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense. There's simple search stuff that you can do. I'm going to hold off on that because we're going to talk about that, believe it or not, next week already. All right. You can bring up a color palette. If you bring up and you type equal color, it brings up the palette here. Why would you do that? Maybe you want the person to, you say, hey, welcome to my site. Come in here and select your background color. And you bring another one up that says, now select your text color, as an example, if you wanted to do that. You could do something like that. I don't know if you'd want to, but you could. Again, we already talked about the for. You can use that with different types of elements. Meters, I believe everybody in here, you've all been out to some kind of a site that says we've reached 80% of our goal type of thing, whatever it is. GoFundMe has a lot of this kind of stuff in there. All right. All right. And finally, they give you a web page that uses all that. And it's not everything, but it's pretty good. They show you the HTML. They show you the CSS. There's a lot more than what I have. And that's it. All right. Sorry, it's 9:03. Please come back at 9:15. I'm going to see if real quick I can fix my legend that was on here by putting it into its own line. So I just did it, put that legend onto its own line, whoops, and let's run it, make sure that that works. And you see now, even though it's ugly, well, it shouldn't say legend equal, but you get the idea, the legend is in there. All right, so I'll fix that so it'll just say name, address, city, state, zip, and I know you can go in and you can center that too. All right. So I just want to hear name, address, city, state, zip. Legend. And there it is.